The year is 2026 and Philippine tennis is not just waking up, it is exploding into a full revolution. If you walk past any public court in Manila today, you will see them completely packed with young kids swinging oversized rackets. They are all dreaming of the exact same thing. They want to be exactly like the girl who just shattered the glass ceiling on the highest level of professional tennis. But before Eala became the ultimate symbol of national pride, she stood on the absolute edge of becoming just another prodigy who never grew up. I want you to look at the pure dominance she is showing right now on the main courts. Watch how she dictates the baseline rallies and breaks the physical will of seasoned veterans. Now rewind the tape. Go back to the brutal transition years where every single match felt like carrying the heavy weight of over 100 million people on her tired shoulders. She was a celebrated junior Grand Slam champion stepping into a professional arena that absolutely did not care about her past trophies. The gap between junior success and professional survival is a massive graveyard of broken dreams. So many incredibly talented young players fall into that abyss and never climb out. Alex almost became a ghost in that exact same unforgiving system. She fought severe physical limitations and agonizing mental barriers while the whole world watched and judged every single dropped set. The contrast between her past struggles and her present glory is staggering. How do you go from losing heartbreakers in tiny obscure tournaments to triggering the biggest sporting movement Southeast Asia has ever witnessed? What exactly unlocked her true potential in this explosive year? The answer is not just about hitting a cleaner forehand or serving a bit faster. It is about a fundamental rewiring of a human being under unimaginable stress. To understand how she finally engineered this historic shockwave, we have to go back to the very beginning when she realized her natural talent was simply no longer enough to survive. Imagine you are only 15 years old. Every single time you swing your racket, you carry the desperate hope of an entire developing nation. That is not a badge of honor. That is a suffocating pressure that can crush a teenager before they even step onto the stadium court. When Alex left the comfort of home to train full-time at the famous Rafa Nadal Academy, she was anointed as the chosen one of her country. The local media coverage treated every minor practice session like a Grand Slam championship final. The pressure was immediate and it was immense. Millions of people expected her to conquer the professional world overnight just because she completely conquered the junior circuit. But the stark reality of the adult tour is a rude and violent awakening. When a young Southeast Asian player steps onto the main stage, she hits a massive physical wall almost immediately. The professional tour is packed with towering athletes who hit unbelievably heavy balls and serve like absolute machines. The physical demands of the adult tour are violently different from anything you see in junior tennis. Alex found herself standing across the net from fully grown women who had spent a decade building unbreakable muscle mass and terrifying raw power. Her finesse and her brilliant tactical mind were undeniable, but they were constantly being overpowered by pure brute force. She realized very quickly that the women on the other side of the net wanted to physically intimidate her and hit her right off the court. They did not care about her junior rankings or her famous training academy lineage. They only cared about breaking her serve and systematically destroying her remaining confidence. She had to learn how to grind in the shadows just to survive this horrible transition period. We are talking about playing in completely empty stadiums at low-tier events where there is no glory and barely enough prize money to cover a plane ticket. She traveled from one obscure foreign city to another, fighting desperately for a handful of ranking points just to keep her fragile dream alive. She spent countless nights sitting alone in cheap hotel rooms after brutal three-set losses where her body simply gave out before her mind did. She would look at her hands blistered from trying to return massive flat serves and wonder if the physical gap was simply too wide to ever cross. The isolation of those losing streaks was absolutely deafening, but she kept showing up every single morning to face the grind again. She kept doing the invisible heavy work while internet trolls and impatient casual fans started asking if she was just another overhyped kid who peaked way too early in her life. It takes a very specific type of mental madness to keep pushing your body to the limit when the match results do not match the insane effort you put in. You have to believe in a grand vision that nobody else can see, even when your own muscles feel completely broken. We all love watching these incredible underdog stories finally unfold on the big screen, because they deeply remind us of our own silent battles and our own hidden daily struggles. If you find yourself deeply moved by this raw kind of human resilience and want to understand the real stories behind the athletes we admire, then you should join our community and subscribe right now. We spend hundreds of hours dissecting the deep psychology of these exact moments and having you here with us makes this entire journey so much better. But just as Alex finally started to adapt to the heavy baseline rallies and find a steady physical rhythm, the ruthless tennis system prepared its most cruel test yet. This upcoming phase would strip away all her remaining confidence and push her right into the darkest chapter of her entire career. In professional tennis, there is nowhere to hide. When you lose your confidence, the hard court becomes a massive glaring mirror, reflecting all your absolute worst weaknesses. Welcome to the darkest chapter in the story of Alex Eala. Between the years 2024 and 2025, she hit a terrifying and suffocating plateau. It was not just a minor dip in form or a brief stroke of bad luck. It felt like a complete, systematic collapse of her fundamental game. Imagine standing under the blazing sun for 3 exhausting hours only to lose in the final deciding set simply because your legs completely refused to move anymore. This became a brutal recurring nightmare that haunted her entire schedule. Match after match, she would fight brilliantly for the first 2 sets, displaying that signature tactical genius and beautiful shot-making. But the exact moment the match crossed the 2-hour mark, you could physically see the heavy, devastating toll. Her footwork would become slightly heavy and uncoordinated. Her breath would grow ragged and desperate. You could almost hear the heavy, exhausting breathing echoing across those empty, forgotten side courts. Just close your eyes and listen to the steady, terrifying sound of the ball bouncing before her opponent unleashed another massive baseline strike. Every single bounce felt like a loud ticking countdown to her inevitable physical defeat. She was suffering devastating third-set losses to players she possessed way more natural talent than. But raw talent means absolutely nothing when your lungs are burning like fire and your muscles are totally failing under the relentless heavy assault of pure tour-level power hitters. The sporting world is incredibly cruel to early bloomers who stumble along the way. The exact same media channels that once called her a generational prodigy suddenly started running harsh segments questioning her long-term viability on the tour. The whispering in the locker rooms grew louder and more malicious. Casual fans on the internet began to openly speculate if she simply lacked the physical stamina required for the big leagues. They actively compared her to a dozen other junior champions who flashed brightly and then faded away into total permanent obscurity. They openly questioned if her frame was simply too fragile for the modern power game. Every single time she logged online, she saw the crushing disappointment radiating from her home country. The expectation had completely mutated from hopeful, beautiful support into a heavy, toxic pressure that choked her during crucial pressure points. You could see the heavy emotional toll in her posture during post-match press conferences, where she struggled to find answers for her repeated early tournament exits. The ultimate breaking point arrived during a totally demoralizing first-round exit against a towering seasoned European power hitter. It was a match that perfectly encapsulated her entire recurring nightmare. She was completely bullied off the baseline from the very first point. Her opponent hit heavy topspin balls that kicked up violently high to her backhand, forcing her to retreat miles behind the baseline just to make contact. Eala looked completely lost, physically exhausted, and totally overpowered by the sheer weight of the incoming shots. She spent the entire grueling match just desperately trying to survive instead of actively trying to win the points. It was incredibly suffocating and painful to watch. You could see the absolute despair written all over her face during the quiet changeovers, while she stared blankly at her racket. She was drowning deeply in the immense gap between her elite technical skills and her glaring physical limitations. The tension surrounding her struggling career was reaching an absolute breaking point. Loyal fans felt incredibly frustrated and desperately wanted some kind of magical escape for her. At the exact moment, every professional analyst was completely ready to cross her name off the elite list of promising young prospects. Eala took a massive, deliberate step back and made a radical decision that permanently altered the trajectory of her career. People often say progress in tennis happens slowly, but sometimes it comes from completely breaking down the basic foundation and starting over. In 2026, Eala did not just train a little bit harder or run a few more miles. She completely redesigned her core weapon and completely rebuilt her entire physical structure. She vanished into the quiet off-season and basically went to absolute war with her own body. She realized that trying to simply outlast these massive professional hitters was a totally losing strategy that would only lead to more heartbreak. She needed to finally become the aggressor. She needed to build a physical frame that could not only absorb heavy incoming pace but violently redirect it back across the net. She added significant lean muscle mass to her lower body, focusing entirely on generating explosive kinetic power from the ground up. But the real beautiful revolution happened inside her mind and within her swing technique. She consciously stopped playing like the heavily burdened symbol of a developing nation and finally started playing like a cold, calculating assassin on the tennis court. She completely stripped away the lingering fear of disappointing millions of people and totally replaced it with a ruthless, burning desire to dominate the person standing across the net. The absolute most shocking technical shift was the complete reconstruction of her forehand. Let us completely slow down and break down this massive mechanical change. Look very closely at the split screen of her swing form from 2 years ago compared directly to her new form in early 2026. In the past, her racket preparation was slightly delayed, and her contact point was completely defensive. She was basically just rolling the heavily spun ball back into the court just to stay alive in the long rally. Now look closely at the new aggressive motion. Her body coil is incredibly tight and loaded with tension. She takes the incoming ball incredibly early, right on the rise before it can jump up to her shoulders. Instead of letting the heavy topspin push her deep behind the line, she violently steps inside the baseline and aggressively flattens out the shot. She brilliantly turned her absolute biggest liability into a highly lethal offensive weapon. When I first noticed this incredibly aggressive new grip and swing path during a practice session, it completely blew my mind because fundamentally changing your core swing mechanics at the highest professional level is incredibly dangerous and extremely rare. I am genuinely curious if any of you dedicated tennis players watching right now have ever tried to completely reconstruct your forehand mechanics during a competitive tournament season. Let me know down in the comments exactly how long it actually took you to completely trust your new swing under real match pressure. Because what Eala successfully did right here is just mathematically insane. The defining pivot moment of this entire incredible transformation happened in the early spring of 2026 against a solid top 50 veteran grinder. This was a specific player who had easily overpowered and exhausted Eala just 12 months prior. The stadium crowd entirely expected another brutal physical beatdown, but right from the opening return game, the veteran opponent looked completely shocked and disoriented. Eala was absolutely no longer retreating. Every single time the veteran hit a heavy, deep ball, Eala stood. Her ground stepped aggressively forward and ripped a clean, stunning winner straight down the line. It was an absolute tactical masterclass in violently taking away time and space from your opponent. The veteran kept looking frantically at her coaching box in total disbelief. Eala looked absolutely terrifying and completely unstoppable. Her new footwork was flawless, and the heavy muscular base allowed her to hit with explosive punishing power from incredibly compromised defensive positions. The emotional catharsis of watching her finally systematically dismantle a player who used to physically bully her was absolutely incredible to witness. The dark, depressing days of burning lungs and tragic third-set collapses were officially over forever. She had finally fundamentally solved the complex physical puzzle that was holding back her brilliant tactical mind for so many years. And when the final technical knot was forcefully untied, the rest of the professional tour suddenly realized they were facing a completely uncontrollable storm. What happened next was not just a good run of form. It was a highly calculated campaign of conquest where Eala turned the exact same players who used to physically beat her into completely helpless victims of her brand new game. The momentum shift was absolutely terrifying to witness. She went on an absolute tear across the global. Hard court swing, stringing together 12 consecutive victories against established top 50 opponents. Just picture the sweltering heat of the summer tournaments where she systematically dismantled former Grand Slam finalists. This was not a lucky streak. This was a brutal, systematic dismantling of the tour hierarchy. Every single match felt like a masterclass in pure geometric dominance. Her dramatic climb up the world rankings was mathematically staggering. She jumped from sitting completely outside the top 100 straight into the elite top 30 bracket in less than 5 months. She completely imposed her aggressive new will onto matches that used to terrify her. She essentially took her perceived physical weakness and brilliantly flipped it into an overwhelming advantage built entirely on explosive foot speed and lethal tactical precision. Whenever massive power hitters tried to hit straight through her, she simply absorbed the heavy pace. She bent her knees extremely low to the ground and found unbelievable sharp angles that totally defied the basic laws of physics. She redirected the heavy yellow ball straight down the lines. She ran her opponents completely ragged across the baseline until they literally gasped for air and dropped their heads in pure total exhaustion. She was moving so incredibly efficiently that she made the absolute hardest athletic shots look totally effortless. You could clearly see the deep frustration building in the wide eyes of her opponents. They would hit their absolute best offensive strikes, only to see the ball come flying right back at their feet with even more blinding speed and venom. Professional tennis analysts who previously wrote off her entire career were suddenly forced to eat their exact words on live international television. Grand Slam legends sitting high up in the broadcast commentary booths started openly comparing her incredible court coverage and lethal shot making to some of the absolute greatest counterpunchers in the entire long history of the sport. They all universally agreed that this was absolutely no longer just a temporary hot streak or a random lucky flash of brilliance. She had successfully cemented herself as a permanent, undeniable force on the global stage. You could physically feel the electric heavy energy pulsing through the massive concrete stadium every single time she stepped onto the court. The local crowds knew they were watching something incredibly special unfold right before their very own eyes. The thunderous applause grew exponentially louder with every single dominant straight-set victory. She was no longer just a struggling young underdog hoping for a lucky break in the draw. She was a legitimate apex predator, actively hunting for major tournament trophies. Winning matches on green grass or blue hard courts is one amazing thing, but the true massive legacy Eala is actively creating in 2026 goes far beyond the white painted lines of a simple tennis court. Alex Eala is not just changing her own professional world ranking anymore. Her massive, unprecedented rise in 2026 has triggered an incredible, massive chain reaction that permanently altered the entire fundamental structure of Southeast Asian tennis forever. She completely shattered the thick, heavy, invisible glass ceiling that previously told young kids from her exact region that they could never truly physically compete with the massive, towering giants of the European and American sporting systems. She definitively proved that absolute, raw, tactical brilliance combined with relentless, obsessive physical conditioning can totally rewrite the biological narrative. The local response back home in the sunny islands of the Philippines is absolutely mind-blowing and beautiful to witness. If you look closely at the raw underlying data, the massive cultural impact is completely undeniable. Here is a massive piece of exclusive statistical insight most mainstream global sports networks completely missed during her historic world tour run. During the exact 3-month period of her massive breakout on the professional tour, the total absolute number of new youth tennis registrations at major tennis academies across the capital city of Manila skyrocketed by an unbelievable 400%. Sporting goods stores across the entire tropical nation literally ran out of junior-sized tennis rackets. They completely sold out of specialized tennis court shoes in every single size. They literally had to pour concrete and build brand new public courts overnight just to handle the massive, sudden, overwhelming overflow of young kids absolutely demanding to learn how to properly swing a racket. Wealthy private financial investors who completely ignored the niche sport for several decades are suddenly pouring tens of millions of dollars into brand new elite developmental facilities. These highly advanced athletic facilities are specifically designed to find the next great generational talent, inspired entirely by her solo success. Eala basically single-handedly resurrected a sleeping giant of a sporting nation with absolutely nothing but her tennis racket and her unbreakable human will. She is no longer just swinging for ranking points or chasing expensive tournament prize money checks. She is actively carrying the massive burning Olympic-sized torch for an entire massive continent of aspiring young athletes who finally have a real tangible living hero they can clearly see on their glowing television screens every single weekend. The heavy crushing national pressure that used to absolutely destroy her spirit is now the exact same high-octane emotional fuel that totally drives her unstoppable athletic engine forward. She masterfully transformed the heavy, suffocating weight of an entire expectant nation into an invincible gleaming suit of armor that perfectly protects her on the absolute biggest athletic stages in the entire civilized world. When the long, prestigious history of modern tennis called out loudly for a brand new international superstar, Alex Eala did not just politely answer the ringing phone. She completely kicked the heavy wooden door down and aggressively rewrote the entire sacred rulebook for an entire upcoming generation of future global champions. The real terrifying question right now is not where her actual physical limits truly are. The real question is whether the rest of the established professional tennis world is truly physically and mentally ready for the absolute spectacular chaos she will undoubtedly unleash next on the iconic Grand Slam stage. If you want to find out the exact, thrilling answer to that major question and follow every single heart-pounding step of this incredible ongoing sports revolution, you need to hit subscribe to the channel right now, so you absolutely never miss a single solitary moment of the glorious history we are all watching unfold today.